The boroughs are New York City. The burbs are everywhere else. Real estate is the ultimate game of risk and reward. It's the biggest investment most people ever make. Fortunes are made over a lifetime and lost in a day. And we're not playing with monopoly money. How do you stay ahead? Who's buying? Who's selling? And why? What do they know? We want the truth. You need an edge. Boroughs and Burbs is your secret weapon, giving you the insider knowledge and strategies you need to succeed in the high-stakes world of real estate. From Palm Beach to Palm Springs, Manhattan to Malibu, we press the experts to expose the pain, find the deals, and occasionally predict the future. That's Boroughs and Burbs, Thursdays, 3 o'clock Eastern, noon Pacific. Because everyone can make money in real estate.
Welcome, everybody. Boroughs and Burbs, Season 4, Episode 153. Why is this, Roberto? Why is this Season 4? Because nobody's paid us to deliver a Season 5 yet. So this is like the 50th episode of Season 4. And we're just going to keep going until the sponsors show up. I am your host, John Engel, in New Canaan, Connecticut. And that is my co-host.
I'm Roberto Cabral on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. Thank you so much for being here, and we're very excited to have these two guys with us.
Yes, we are very excited. It's been, I can't believe it's taken us 4 seasons to get to property management. This is such a critical part of the industry. If the building isn't managed well, we can't do our jobs and sell the apartments. So I can't wait to dive in with our guests, Matthew Felner of Felner Corporation and Dylan Pichulik of XL Real Property Management. I think that's my cue to actually show the screen with their websites. So there we go. Defining a new standard of property management in New York City. I guess Dylan, he is dominating the property management scene in New York City. And Felner, well, he's got the burbs, suburbs. You can see that he's doing condos in this shot off of his website. But and there's a strip mall. Truth be told, Felner is my property manager. So when I ask him very hard questions, you're going to know where that's coming from. I also wanted, before I begin, I just want to say thanks. Big shout out to Grace Farms. You'll find them at gracefarms.org. 80 acres, that's a shot of the River building. Pretty soon they've got the Philharmonic coming up for their big fundraiser of the year. Check it out, gracefarms.org. And without any further ado, let's get right into it. Does Matthew or does Dylan want to tell us what the heck is property management anyway?
Can I just say something about Dylan first, real quick? Dylan is the type of guy that will show up in a suit. He shows up, he's ready to go, and the next thing you know, you take him into a property, and then he's looking at a piece of equipment, ties off, jackets off, sleeves are rolled up. He's behind a piece of equipment. He's looking at what year it is because it might be this type of equipment or that type of equipment. And your head starts to spin. You're like, wow, you really need a certain level of expertise to be doing this. And then he leaves, and it's just he looks like the maintenance guy by the time he's gone. He really rolls up his sleeves.
It's a dirty job. I guess I'll start. So, property management, we're here to solve the world's headaches. So, we're really a critical component of all real estate. Somebody's got to run it, make sure it's running properly, make sure expenses in line, and, most importantly, especially for our landlord clients, make sure our tenants are paying rent so we can afford to keep our properties.
Yeah. John, thank you for the warm welcome, and Dylan, look forward to working through this with you. Property management is a very gritty industry. It's one where we're getting yelled at for a living, and it's one of those things that the property manager is the interface between the revenue producer and the revenue receiver. So it's that very critical connection, and if you don't have the right temperament and knowledge and infrastructure and platforms, we're representing very valuable assets across an entire portfolio, and so it's a key ingredient of the success of any landlord.
What percentage of buildings out there are managed by a professional such as yourself, or self-managed by those of us who buy a building and say, I can do this myself?
Too many are self-managed or ultimately will become, property managed. To answer that question, you'd really have to kind of focus on the sector, right? There's the residential assets, there's the condominiums, and then there's really the commercial retail. In the commercial retail space, I'd say it's very rare that there is a self-manager operator for anything over, 10,000 feet or multi-tenant. In the condominium world or the residential world, again, depending on size, it's much more common to find someone that has that mentality, at least for a period of time. What's so hard about cashing the rent check, and so you see it a lot more.
Can I ask you something about your industry as a whole? Is your industry regulated? Are there certifications you need to have to be part of the industry? Is there an association?
As far as to be a property manager, I mean, I don't know much about Connecticut, but definitely here in New York State, the only real requirement is you have to be a licensed broker in order to collect rent on behalf of third parties. So all property managers in New York State are licensed brokers. That's the only real requirement as far as any licensing is concerned. There are lots of organizations. I unfortunately or personally am not affiliated with any of them. But I do know that they exist, both on a state and probably, I'm sure, a national level as well.
Let's take a step back and tell us a little bit about your companies and how you got here today. I mean, did you just wake up one day and say, I think I want to be a property manager? Did you have properties that you had to manage and said, I can do this for others if I can do it for myself? Did you just, did you go to college and say, I'm going to college to be a property manager? I mean, nobody goes and says, I want to be a realtor when I grow up. So, I mean, do they say, I want to be a property manager?
I woke up one day and I said, what job can I do where every single thing is my fault? And I can be the punching bag of basically anyone I encounter. That's basically how I got started. No, not actually. So I actually started Excel, and we're a little bit unique as a property manager because we started out actually not managing buildings, but rather individual apartments held by absentee owners. And so everybody knows what a building property manager does. And when we came along, it's because I actually needed it. I worked for a large real estate developer here in Manhattan, and it was a building down on Broad Street. At the time, it was called the Satai Wall Street, although the building's changed its name since we started. And basically, the way the developer was able to fund the purchase of the building is he pre-sold a lot of the apartments to overseas investors. At the time, you're allowed to pre-sale not to U.S.-based investors, but the Attorney General said it was okay to pre-sell to foreign investors without an offering plan. And since I was a project manager on the deal, a lot of the guys came to me and they're like, Dylan, I'm not getting profit in this deal. I'm getting 5 apartments. I live in the Middle East and I don't want to be a landlord. What do I do? Go find me someone to manage. I can't fix problems, with plumbing or electric when I'm, 5,000 miles away. So I actually started it because I needed it. I looked at the local options of what was available at the time, and there wasn't a really good option. And I said, okay, well, I'm tired of underwriting deals and making spreadsheets all day. Let me give it a whirl and see what happens. So, we started out of sheer need for the service.
What year
in a
was
world where it didn't exist? That was back in 2012. So we've been around for almost 13 years at this point.
Wow.
Yeah, and on our side, I like that answer initially of, you just woke up one day and you wanted to be sitting in this seat. But I'm third generation of a family business that began in 1978, which was originally a business where, my grandfather was part-time at the firehouse and the other part-time was opening the door and locking the door for an investor, commercial owner friend of his. And fast forward until now, I went to school out at Miami, Ohio. I spent some time in Chicago on the brokerage side, and ultimately wanted to carry on the family name and really start to expand and explode what we're doing here. And I'd say the most compelling reasons to be in this business and the most exciting reasons, you have to be somebody that loves people, psychotic people, cool people, any kind of people, because on any given day, I am meeting, I don't know, Dylan, you might agree, 100 people conversations every day. And so that was really an exciting piece of this. And then the other kind of more enticing business reason why I love the industry is, to Dylan's point, if you look in Fairfield County, New Haven County, I'm not disparaging any competitors, but the general manager and the reputation of the manager is like the really dark utility room basement where he answers the phone like management, and then they're just mean to you. We have a totally different philosophy. We have a staff of 46 people. Every Friday, or when it's nice out, we go on the boat. We have, lunches. We've really built this culture around having fun with the people that are involved and kind of the stories, and obviously doing all the blocking and tackling on the properties. But when you're looking at it from that perspective, where it's sort of a good story every day, it's fun. And we get to work with people like John and his wife, Melissa, and, they're lovely. I mean, that's part of the key too. The client has to be an interesting and appreciative and nice person.
Boat lunches. I'm working at the wrong shop.
Come on up.
And you talked about the relationship with the clients, and you talk about the relationship with the tenants, but it occurs to me that in this environment, it's harder than ever to get the resources to make the repairs and work and do work, especially skilled work on these properties. When there's a major environmental event, a rainstorm, a hurricane, your phones ring off the hook, and everybody, and tree branches are down. I mean, that's a Connecticut thing. I don't know what the equivalent is in New York, but when the phones ring, they all ring at the same time. And your ability to have resources at the ready is probably a key value you provide. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, preparedness is key in this business because, if we get a big rainstorm or a snowstorm, we anticipate that our phones are going to ring off the hook. There's going to be multiple people calling. So you've really got to be prepared. And, I don't think I've ever followed the weather forecast in my life as much as I started doing when I was a property manager. But essentially, when we have these big storms and other, weather events, we have to operate the business like we're the triage at a hospital. You make a list of what the problems are and figure out how you're going to tackle them, who you're going to first, where your biggest risks are, where the most major problems are. And really it becomes, the equivalent of Bellevue on a Friday night at, 10 o'clock after people have had a few drinks in terms of, what you've got to be prepared for and what you're up against. And, we've had a very tough labor market over the past few years, as everybody knows. This isn't just a property management issue. This has been kind of a worldwide, any business issue of how do you get the right resources that are skilled, quality, aren't going to rip you off, and, figure out, what your team is going to be and how you're going to tackle whatever problems life throws at you.
But it's really 24/7 as well. I mean, this weekend I was at a daddy-daughter camping trip with terrible Wi-Fi. I went to bed and it was a new client. They have a tenant, and I saw, when I woke up in the morning, I saw email 2 a.m. The toilet has overflowed. 3 a.m. Plumbers here. Plumbers still here. 4 a.m. 5 a.m. All this happened all throughout the night. I had no idea. I was just CC'd on the emails because I was like the liaison between all of them, and I started calling in the morning when I could. But that's a major emergency, and that's like 24/7.
Yeah, and that's when emergencies happen. Good.
Yeah, well, Roberto, that exact environment and that scenario is typically where the prior mentioned self-operators begin to Google property management. And to John's point, that is a critical component of the value of a management company. So the way we look at that, and I'm actually very curious how Dylan deals with that down in the Manhattan market, but up in Fairfield County, New Haven County, obviously the trade markets have been in massive demand. And one of our leverage points is that we've built this vendor network over the last, in our case, 45 years, where we have a lot of buying power with these contractors. We just do. So there's really two prongs to this, but one is that, right? Our gutter cleaner probably does $500,000 a year in gutter cleanings. So if the gutter's falling down, he's coming. And part two of that, and something it's a model that we've entered into, is and this is critical for anybody kind of thinking about a management company, but in-house, we have staff, and it's 10 maintenance persons. So those maintenance staff, all throughout COVID and beyond, those are controlled by us. We're not reliant on a third party who's not going to show up if the job isn't $5,000 or more. So they've been a business loss as far as paying them and the trucks and the services and all of that. But the value on the other side, the help to our managers, the immediacy of response to a tenant, is why we keep that model. And that is hypercritical in today's market, because you go on Angie's List and you have a $3,000, we'll pick on gutters, replacement or repair. They're either not going to come, or if they do come, you have to ask them, why are you coming? Why don't you have a pipeline of four months worth of work? Because there's so much work for all of them.
I love that. Why are you available to me?
Yeah. Why are you here?
It's actually really important. Why are you here? Because there is so much demand for any work that you need. And people, oftentimes ask me, because my team is incredibly responsive. They're like, I guess you guys aren't that busy. It's like, no, we're just incredibly efficient. But you start to worry when you call 10 vendors and you can't get them out, and one guy picks up the phone and is like, yeah, I'll be there in an hour. It's like, okay, but why don't you have more work?
So Dylan,
how is that? I'm sorry, John. I was just curious how that was in New York City, if you're seeing the same trade tightness.
Oh, it's the same thing that you guys face up there. And one of the powers of having a property management company, especially a large portfolio like ours, we manage around $6 billion worth of property here in the city, is you're dealing with trades that are relying on you and depend on you for work, because you give them so much work. So it allows us to take priority over other clients, and especially smaller third-party clients. And we also just have to make sure we're as prepared as possible, so that we do have big events that, flooding or rainstorms or snowstorms, that we've got all of our equipment stockpiled, we're ready to go. We've got our snow shovels, our dehumidifiers, our water vacuums, our temporary ACs. I mean, whatever supply we need, we already have, ready to go, sitting in storage, so that when these events pop up, we already have, made advanced plans with the vendors. Hey, don't forget about us. Like, remember how much work we gave you last year? Don't let us down for the storm. And you just got to make sure that, your trades are, with you to the extent you can keep them there.
This is maybe a weird question, but it's a follow-up on what Roberto said. It's at 2:00 in the morning and there's a major leak and you get the call. It occurs to me that a lot of these trades do not live in the same zip code as where the problem is occurring, that maybe you got to get, Dylan, somebody in from the other end of Queens, maybe Matthew, do your guys have to come in from far away? We did a show once upon a time about the Hamptons and just how difficult it is to get labor in the Hamptons, but this is a daily occurrence for both of you. Not only is it hard to get labor, it's hard to get labor nearby. And when that $10 million or $40 million townhouse that Roberto's talking about springs a leak, they're not waiting for hours for a response.
No, absolutely. That's why we're always, when we work with vendors, we always have to make sure that they have somebody local in a particular area so that when we do need you on call, that there's going to be an issue that you're ready to go. Because to your point, and actually we even looked at a Hamptons office and I kind of ran away from the idea because, driving back from the Hamptons on a Monday morning to the city, you see the line of traffic trying to get off, the highway onto from the expressway onto Montauk Highway, you see a 2 hour long buildup of traffic trying to get off the interstate. I think exit 70 or whatever it is. And you're like, I want nothing to do with this. I don't want to have to, figure out how to get vendors there quickly when they're sitting in bumper to bumper traffic. And we just have to make sure that in every kind of geographic location throughout the city that we cover, we have emergency staff available that, maybe not be able to necessarily fix the problem, but at least someone to come and stop the bleeding, start cleaning up the mess until we can get whatever professional we need in place to actually make the repair.
It's really crucial here, John. It's really crucial here too, because we live in such a vertical environment. If there's a flood, it can go floor, and it can cause a tremendous amount of damage. And a lot of the insurance companies, the insurance is skyrocketing because of floods. And I can't tell you, even over the past year or so, I've had a handful of rentals where, I mean, a measurable percentage of them are people that, like, there was a flood in my apartment and we're renovating. We need a short-term rental. I mean, it happens a lot.
I mean, is it at the point where you've got a guy double parked in front of Roberto's building like all the time with a wrench on his lap? We're ready for this snowstorm. I mean, it just occurs to me that when you say we have people local in the area, that's incredibly expensive and hard to do.
It's the hardest part of scale too. When we as a management company operator are looking at a potential client or assignment, we really break it up geographically into Stamford and Bridgeport, those two major markets, a little bit in New Haven as well. But, we have to have resources in each of those, I'll call them metropolises for lack of a better suburban word. But if we don't have that, then we are not very effective, and then that will become a major problem. So at all times, we have maintenance staff that's on call in Stamford and in Bridgeport, or just around. But yeah, that's hypercritical, and sometimes you do have to drive. But when you do, people are upset.
We're getting a question. Russell asks the question, what's property management software are you using? Which begs the question, what is property software anyway? Property management software. What does it do?
So the property software we use over here at Excel is Yardi. Yardi is really kind of the largest and kind of most well-established property management software. It essentially tracks everything that we do as property manager. It tracks our leases, our tenants, all of our maintenance requests are there. It tracks any of the critical information that we need to run our business. And that's, kind of the central database where all of our information regarding Excel and its clients and its tenants is stored. They're very, complicated softwares, very expensive softwares to run, but definitely kind of the brain of all of the property management activity we do.
Yeah, and there's been outstanding increases or improvements in the software side. So we run on a platform called AppFolio, which is a national, very similar to Yardi. There's Yardi, there's Buildium, there's AppFolio, and then there's maybe, a handful of other smaller operators. But every single thing that we do as an organization, and also that's client facing, is through AppFolio. So that's where tenants pay rent. That's where the owners get their statements. That's internally how we organize work orders. And that advent of software in this business is a completely necessary piece. Prior to that, if you can imagine management, and I think Dylan would agree, it's a business of 1,000 things per day that all take 30 seconds. And unless you have an effective way to organize that, which this software has provided very effectively, you will collapse. No human on earth can organize that much stuff in their brain. I don't care how smart they are.
It seems to me a point of difference. So we've just rattled off two of them, but if I offer Roberto my property management services, and I'm going to do it for half of what Dylan does. I'll run his building for half of what you're doing. It occurs to me that you're going to start with, I've got the resources at the ready, and I've got better software. And Engel, a new player, an underfinanced new player to the business, is probably why don't you finish the sentence? What value are you providing over the new entries into the business who are offering to do it for less?
Yeah, I mean, the scale is scaling in management is a very challenging thing to do, and it takes a long time. And the reason for that is because it's so geographic, right? What we just talked about, you have to have very immense local knowledge, but it's not like a software that you patent and then you can sell to the entire globe. So it's a step by step. You know, you have to get the clients to hire the managers, and then there's always that dance as you're kind of going up. But for a new entry into management, they don't have that. They don't have the buying power. They don't have the scale of units to make the software reasonably affordable. They themselves are the ones that are getting those calls at 2 a.m. So if they don't have a system with maintenance on call and an on-call service and all these ancillary internal things, they can't be effective. So that's part of, there's really two barriers to entry. One is that process that you're describing, and the other is that people don't want to get yelled at all day. So no one wants to do this. And, for Dylan or myself, that's a benefit, but that's the reality. You talk to a 20-something and say, you want to start a property management company? And Dylan, your story is very interesting in that regard. I've not met one person in my life out of all those 100 conversations a day that's ever said that. And it's wild.
No, it's definitely tough. And even when we started, I went in kind of kicking and screaming, and we saw an opportunity there. But I said, wait, I'm going to spend my entire day getting yelled at because the toilet's broken and the refrigerator's not working or it's 90 degrees. And, it's definitely a hiring challenge. But to kind of go back to, the question about why would you hire, someone more established versus like the new guy in the block, it really comes down to expertise. And, pricing, we found, especially here in Manhattan, where you have, properties that are phenomenal value, pricing is an important component for our clients, but expertise is even more important because property managers, in the way I always describe it to our clients, we're just like accountants. Who's cheaper, the accountant at H&R Block for $300 or the fancy accountant for $1,500 that does your taxes? Who's actually cheaper? And if you look at the face value of the equation, the additional outlay of expense, H&R Block is a lot cheaper. But if you're dealing with an experienced professional who knows what they're doing, it's not their first rodeo. They know how to solve a problem. They have the resources to do it. Give me the $1,500 accountant any day. He's going to save me much more money on my taxes and have a much, better financial plan for me than somebody who's just, sitting in front of a computer doing those basic inputs and saying, okay, here's your return.
There's no question about that. So you mentioned something that's interesting about hiring. How do you go about hiring? Because in any business, you want quality people, but this is a certain situation where unless you're hiring someone who has experience in your particular field and understands that, it's really difficult to find someone who's going to, after getting yelled at for the first month or 2 months, or to say, listen, I'm going to stick this out. I love this. I'm behind the company. So what do you look for? What do you ask?
Dylan, you want me to start with that one?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, Roberto, that question really hits close to home. I mean, we've hired about 15 additional headcount in the last 2 years, and that process has been daunting, not only because of the tightness of the labor market, take the trade market out of the equation, but, you have that sort of more macro scenario with the labor market. And then you add in the fact that the job itself is not very glamorous. So the things that we do, and I think have done well, is the company culture is critical, because if the job itself is not so glamorous, at least the environment for work is, and that goes a long way with folks. Part two of that is that it's very difficult to find somebody that has, on day one, a turnkey experience with dealing with the 1,000 facets of management. So the things that I always emphasize for new hires, and the way we look at it is, I want a communication major. I want somebody who can articulate, who is responsive, who is able to organize thoughts very well. And B, I want someone that has general infrastructure capability. Oh, John's scrolling through our sheet. Some of these folks, they won't take their photo, and we really got to work on that. But, you know, in all of these various hires that John is scrolling through, I mean, those are the criteria, and then you have to put them into a situation where they have some counterpart that they can train from for a period of time. And again, we're going back to the value of a larger company versus small, because you can't expect somebody to just go out there and talk to John Engel about, you know, how to drive his investment or what to do about a particular problem. You know, they have to learn for a year or 2 years. So it's a challenge, there's no doubt. But, you know, the third thing is you have to pay them above market, and that's the bottom line. And if that means a little less NOI on the entity side, you know, so be it. That's the way it is, because too many companies in this space, they have an incredibly high rate of employee churn, or they have employees that will exist, but, you know, not do a whole lot.
I'm struck by 50% of everybody is an engineer and 50% seem to be property managers. Seems engineer heavy.
You mean the job titles?
Yeah.
We use the term engineer, but in our model, I don't want to get too specific, but there are certain properties that are of a certain size where the engineer serves as the manager, you know, maybe a corporate park or something a little bit larger where they're there full time. They are effectively being the engineer, or I'm sorry, serving as the manager. And, you know, every property is a little bit different with respect to what is the need for the property management. Some properties are very admin and financial intensive, in which case it's more back office. But others that are maybe older, or they have a lot of interior common area or a lot of systems that the landlord is responsible for, the job is pretty much engineering, right? There's very little emphasis on the rest of the admin, and everything is on the physical plant side.
How about you, Dylan? Talk to us about, I guess, the kinds of properties and the kinds of people that you have to have on staff to service them.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very difficult, you know, and daunting task to find staff. I mean, especially, you know, across the board, property management, as we all know, is not the most glamorous of the sectors in real estate. You're dealing with a lot of, you know, people screaming at you. You're typically not calling the property manager unless you have a problem. And, you know, we operate mostly at the upper level of the market here in New York City. So I need a specific kind of property manager. And, you know, it takes us a really long time to find what we want. And we go through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of resumes before we, you know, end up bringing people on board with us, because we need a certain level of quality. Because here at Excel, you're going to be working on, you know, potentially $100 million apartments or, you know, $50,000 a month rentals. We need a certain pedigree that typically doesn't exist in the market. I'll say that in a lot of cases, you know, we'll put you, you know, I'm more interested in, you know, in the kind of, you know, overall package of who we're hiring, and not necessarily the direct property management experience, because we offer a very unique service, especially at the individual apartment level, that's much less maintenance and repair it's a lot lighter on that load where where it makes up for it is in general, communication skills and responsiveness. So we try to go to the general market to find people. I find we've had most success by bringing people who just have the right attitude, the right communication style, and the right desire to assist our clients and train them to do what they need to know here at Excel. Because when I go to look at, kind of the offerings that I'm given when we're looking for people, I'm often disappointed by what's out there. And if you've been at a bigger shop here in Manhattan, one of these property management behemoths, we won't name any names because I don't want to throw anyone under the bus. I don't like the kind of, employees that they have to, that they hire. So I get frustrated and I say, okay, who can we meld into the right, desirable property manager for Excel? Because for the most part, it doesn't exist to the extent I want it to when I'm trying to pick someone, let's say, off the shelf.
So Dylan, you'll like this. We had a round of interviews, and I must have missed this in the resume, but we had somebody show up. It was for a manager position not long ago. And when we began asking the questions, they were a manager of a Chick-fil-A, and they thought that this was a similar job.
Yeah, we get a lot of that. The people that you have coming in, it's like, no, it's a little bit different over here than what you were doing before. Yeah, but I mean, we just hired somebody a couple of weeks ago, and I think I went through about 700 resumes, and I did it personally myself because I want to make sure we're hiring the right people. Culture to us is incredibly important. I want all the employees to be happy here. I want them to love it here. You're going to be dealing with difficult circumstances in a lot of cases. And I think I went through about 700 resumes before we finally hired the right person, who so far has been fantastic.
Wow.
Roberto, we could either talk about evictions and legal, or we could talk, we could go there. Why don't we go there? Is that a big part of the job, or is that not so much?
In the city, it's been a huge part of the job. Before 2019, the rent laws were much more. I don't want to say much more relaxed, but they were much more relaxed than they are now. But when 2019 came around, they did a sweeping overhaul of all the rent laws here in New York State, and they got really strict as far as advanced rent and all these other concepts, and it made it really incredibly difficult to evict somebody here in New York State. If I have a clean case as a landlord, I did everything I'm supposed to do, everything works, everything's in working order. It's just that the tenant's not paying rent. It can take 2 to 3 years to evict a tenant in New York State. So, the process is daunting. It's incredibly expensive. It's incredibly cumbersome. And there's a lot of, especially in light of all the financial hardship people faced over the pandemic, it's really difficult to get people out. So it made it really important for owners and brokers and managers to really properly qualify their tenants. Because if you make a bad decision on a tenant, you don't get a little slap on the wrist and you get them out in 2 or 3 months. Like, for example, I'm from Georgia and my family does real estate down there, and I talk to them, I'm like, yeah, if he doesn't pay rent in 2 months, 3 months, he's out. I'm like, here it's 2 to 3 years. I literally had a guy owe us, he paid rent the first day he moved in and the security deposit. The broker made a bad decision and took a 600 credit score, which we learned our lesson on why we don't do that. And he paid the first day of rent and the security deposit. He owed us about $300-something thousand. We were about to get him out. A week before the marshal was coming, he unfortunately took his life and kind of made us go through a whole nother set of challenges to get the guy out. But it makes it incredibly important to do your due diligence on tenants here, because as a landlord, you will not win in housing court. You will suffer a lot of pain.
Yeah, Connecticut has gotten, I was very interested in the New York side of this because we've all heard the stories of New York evictions and residential management. It is a very big part of the job here. I see it on the commercial side and on the residential side. I think some of those New York laws have rippled or been rippling into Connecticut statute because it is equally as challenging and there is equally as much emphasis on tenant screening. And here in Connecticut, if a tenant doesn't want to leave, or if they want to utilize public services or whoever else to ensure that they can stay by making claims or whatever you have, that is where it turns into what Dylan's describing, where it's a year, it's 2 years, it's 3 years. What's also been interesting on the commercial side, for example, we have a site that had a Bed Bath & Beyond, and obviously, Bed Bath & Beyond is no longer in many environments, filed bankruptcy. So fast forward, we have a vacant suite and we lease it to, this is all public knowledge, but Bob's Stores. And Bob's Stores doesn't even open the doors before they filed bankruptcy 2 months ago. So here we are, we've paid broker's fees, we've given TI allowances, we have exerted an enormous amount of energy on each of those. And where we are right now is we're waiting to take back the keys from bankruptcy court. And so it's been interesting to see that, because your traditional landlord would look at maybe not so much Bob's Stores, but a Bed Bath, and they'd say, wow, A credit tenant, national, global maybe, I just hit a home run. And what we've learned is even at that size and in that credit class, there is no certainty, because they just stopped paying, and if you look at the Bed Bath bankruptcy docket across the nation, the number of suitors that are all looking for 30 million, 40 million, the balance of the lease. I get the notices here. I don't know why they still send them by paper, but they're an encyclopedia that has all of these landlords that are pursuing this that are going to get absolutely nothing in the end. And so all the way down to, a 1-bedroom residential tenant, all the way up to a national credit retail tenant, that is a huge risk from a landlord perspective and a huge burden for the manager.
And in that scenario, the tenant never moved in, but the property is not rentable.
Correct. That's exactly right. They have a lease. Now, they didn't move in under that lease, but we still have to, which is being facilitated by an attorney in Greenwich at thousands of dollars, go through the process of the bankruptcy filings, the possession demands, this very bureaucratic and extrapolated process that, even as I'm sitting here today, is results in a vacant space that has a bunch of old shelves and old shoes that we can't show.
And is it plausible in other scenarios that a landlord would then come after you guys to say, you guys misguided us, or something to that effect? Is that plausible or does that happen somewhere in other parts of the country or whatever?
I've not seen that. I mean, usually there's a third-party brokerage involved, and everybody is acting on good faith. The landlord is involved in the diligence process of a prospective tenant, and this is just an inherent risk of the business. Now, I don't know if some management companies may have misrepresented who the tenant was. That would be more of a fraud thing, but no, in a typical environment where there's a retailer or a residential tenant, it's part of the game. It's part of the pro forma of any type of landlord. Maybe Dylan, what do you think? I mean, I assume you as well, but we are responsible for tenant selection in many environments, residential tenant selection. So we look at the credit report, the background check, all of that. I don't know if there's any exposure of that. I mean, I'd like to think the landlords are reasonable to say, hey, no one could have seen this coming. But, that's an interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I mean, Excel does not operate as a broker. We don't do any brokerage in Excel, so that insulates us from that concept a little bit. We're not doing, we're not the procuring broker. We have nothing to do with the actual transaction. Oftentimes you are asked to look at financial paperwork. But, as you stated, we're making good faith efforts to do this stuff. Nobody can predict the future. As long as, we've done our due diligence, that's all you can really do. I mean, you can never predict when someone's going to lose his job, or someone's going to pass away, or a national retailer like Bed Bath & Beyond is one day just going to issue a news report, by the way, we're closing at 5 o'clock, and we'll see you guys later, and good luck with the rent. We can only do what we can do, and we've never had a landlord come after us and say, oh, you made a bad decision. I see it oftentimes happening to the broker, though. Oftentimes the broker gets blamed because they're expecting that you're providing them with a bona fide qualified tenant who's going to pay the rent. And some brokers were a little careless in their selection or the guidance they were providing, or a lack of experience, not really knowing what to look out for. And some are a lot more diligent, and just unfortunately life turned around for one of our tenants, and whether they got divorced or whatever, something changed along the way in their tenancy, and it created a bad scenario. But I mean, it's a shame. I mean, I hope that at least I think with all the rent laws they passed in 2019 in New York, they've got to reverse some of these, and they've got to be a little less heavy-handed on the landlord, because while you're quote unquote protecting tenants, at the same time you're punishing landlords for trying to operate legitimate businesses, and in a lot of cases you're driving them bankrupt.
Yep.
So I got a double question. The second part is client satisfaction and how you measure client satisfaction. But it really got me starting to think about, well, who is your client anyway? It occurs to me that it could look like me, mom and pop operator. You already mentioned the guys who live overseas, what I would call the classic absentee landlord, who's not even in the same city with his building. But we've been reading a lot in the Wall Street Journal and elsewhere about the new corporate owner, Blackstone, Carlyle, and other hedge funds who are now getting in and buying massive numbers of thousands of apartments and buildings, real estate as an investment at the corporate and an enormous level. Do you work for any of those people? Is your sweet spot the mom and pops and the smaller investors? Who is your dream client or your typical client? And then we'll get back to, and how do you measure client satisfaction? Occurs to me that if you keep my tenants happy, I'm happy. So is the
John,
tenant the client, or am I the client?
I'm afraid to answer that, to say anybody but yourself.
No, I think it's the tenant. As long as nobody's squawking, I forget I am in a building, right?
Until they get the owner statement showing what you spent to make that tenant happy, then the equation changes a little bit. They definitely want the tenants happy, but they don't want to, in a lot of cases, pay the price to what it took to get the tenant happy.
Yeah,
but that's got to be a different
it's
conversation with a corporate versus a guy. Talking to a couple. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, our sweet spot on the commercial side is, I'll liken it to John and his wife, the mom and pop investor owners. And then we'll go, a little bit further into the smaller REITs or, investment companies that may own, 3 or 4, like a Time Equities in New York City. They're actually much larger, but we work with them here in Connecticut. I don't expand beyond that level. And I feel like a lot of the operators or owners at that level are working with some of the behemoths that Dylan was talking about, your Cushman and those types of companies that are very institutional and kind of more set up for that type of dialogue. Dylan, who do you work for?
We really run the gamut because we have actually a couple of different models that we run. We run 3 different models here at Excel. One of which is the management of individual rental apartments and townhouses. Our second line of business is our multifamily model, where we run a lot of multifamily rental properties. And then I have a third ultra luxury style business where I manage for actually owner occupants. So somebody from wherever owns either a townhouse or a high value condo here in the city. And we actually oversee the operation of the property on behalf of that owner. So we pay their bills, we oversee their service contracts, whatever improvement projects we want to make. They call us and say, hey, I want to paint the kitchen blue, go get it done. So we kind of really operate for a variety of clients. Some of our clients are the one-off landlord, and their father happened to own an apartment and they inherited it, over time. We work for a lot of institutional clients who are bought multifamily in bulk and need someone to oversee the operations. Some of our clients are, an owner who bought the apartment next door because he wanted to expand his portfolio, but doesn't want to deal with, the onus of being a landlord, wants to be left alone, but loves having an investment property. So it really depends. We have some large institutional clients. We have some small mom and pop clients. We have some big celebrity clients and big CEO clients. We really run the gamut as far as clients are concerned. And as far as our favorite clients, our favorite clients are those that are reasonable, that understand kind of the reality of situations. I mean, I hope that's true, John. Although when you believe you're reasonable, we don't necessarily know that others also agree you're reasonable. Roberto can probably tell us more about that. But someone who's understanding of situations and operates within the same reality we do, because oftentimes clients have a very unreasonable expectation about what we can do as property managers and what we can't do, and that's really who we enjoy working with the most.
Client satisfaction. Do I only hear from you when as you say, the word screaming has come up at least 6 times in the episode, and it never comes up when we're talking to ordinary people on this show. So you guys seem to be in a volatile environment. Talk to me about client satisfaction. Do you actually on a quiet day write to your clients and say everything's great?
That's really I've spent a lot of time thinking about how to do that. I think the long-standing philosophy, for better or worse, is, if you're not getting yelled at and the phone isn't ringing, things are good. To take the active approach, we've debated instruments like surveys. Like, do we send a survey out on SurveyMonkey and say, how happy are you with us? How happy are you with the manager? The overarching feedback to that thought has been, do not send that survey out, because it will only introduce 4,000 new work orders and things. So, it's really hard. I mean, you talk to the clients well enough that they, you have a good vibe on where things are. And, as far as like tenant satisfaction and things like that, oftentimes the landlords don't want us to send that out because it's just going to cost them money. They're going to say,
that'll cost you a lot of money
to reach out. The sink's a little loose. Like, can you come and take care of this? So I would welcome any kind of effective tool to measure that. We're proud. I can count on one hand in the last 45 years that we've been terminated from an assignment, and we're very proud of that. Other than a building selling or something like that. So, I mean, we all work tirelessly. The problem in this business is that every single day, John mentioned a quiet day. I have that, periodically, and I'll get in the office and I'll say, you know what, today might be a good day to do this. And then I'll use today as an example, right? Came in, really nothing on the schedule other than this. I have a property in Greenwich. It's getting painted, and the contractor had not done a lead inspection or a lead test. Starts to sand the building. Resident comes out, buys a test on Amazon, does a lead test, comes back positive. Now, later tonight, after this call, I'm going down to meet the health department, the great city of Greenwich, and trying to figure that out. So, it's just one of those businesses where every day is different.
I got to push back. Both of you are telling me that in an age of transparency, communication, technology, neither one of you thinks it's a good idea and can't figure out a way to measure and have that conversation. It's incredible to me. Really, is there not a survey that you could ask a guy like me and say, what are your priorities over the next couple of years? Would you like to save, explore solar and save on your energy bills? Would you like to talk, would you like to decrease the amount of time?
John, these are the types of questions you send out and they don't answer any of those, and they come back with all the list of stuff they're talking about. They're like, by the way, the pipe, and these problems, I can't imagine your phone calls. I mean, I would be like, oh, it's Jim, because your problems aren't small problems. they could be mammoth things all day at any. I mean, you're literally dealing with time bombs everywhere.
Everywhere, and mostly on Friday nights at 10 o'clock. That's when the biggest, that's when most of the challenges happen. But, you know, to Matt's point, like, oftentimes we'll have owners and we'll say, hey, let's check in with our tenant and make sure everything's okay. That is something we've learned not to do. That will cost the landlord a tremendous amount of money because, you know, look, major problems and things that impact the tenant's daily life we want to fix. But if we want our tenant, if we invite him to go scrutinize the apartment and tell us every little thing he wished were repaired, every landlord, every client we'd have would go bankrupt because, oh, I want this, I want this, I want this. I mean, we want to, you know, obviously you don't want to be ignorant of what's happening in your property and be, you know, kind of negligent landlord, but you don't want to invite the tenant to kind of drum up and create problems that didn't necessarily exist.
Electric,
Well, Dylan, what about the
there's
client?
opportunities, electric supply. Would you like us to rebid your insurance? Those are the kinds of things where I feel like, oh, my partner, my building manager, the partner is thinking about how to save me money, you know, or any of these, you know, priorities for me. And you could introduce new vendors who would bid on these things, you know, an insurance company.
Yeah, that
Okay.
we do for our clients. So I'm,
Okay.
you know, as CEO, I'm routinely talking to our clients, checking in, making sure they're happy. I will say that for the most part, our clients are incredibly vocal about what their wishes and desires are. We, you know, speak to them on a regular basis, and we do check in and say, hey, how's it going? We also come to you with recommendations. Hey, you know, I'm a very involved CEO. I love, you know, our client base, and I really mostly enjoy talking to our clients. You know, and we come to them with the suggestions of, hey, I was walking you up by your building. I really think we should do this. Or, you know, we were doing turnover and I think, you know, it's time to upgrade the hardwood floor. Like we've, you know, sanded it down to the bone at this point. We might benefit from a different type of flooring. You know, let's take the hardwood flooring out of the kitchen. Let's replace it with tile. It'll wear better. So we definitely do it kind of on a one-off basis. To do it at a mass level, though, I think kind of becomes an unproductive exercise. And, you know, the client starts coming up with all this great feedback that they feel that will improve your business, but they're only looking at it from, you know, one singular perspective and not kind of the bigger picture of how all these moving, complicated parts have to come into play.
All right.
What do you think, Dylan, about, well, I wanted to answer John's question because it's something I've thought about. And I've gone so far as saying, you know, at what level of an organization is there room for a customer service advocate or whatever the title is? And I know that this is a very, probably a more focused on thing on the realtor and broker side. But, you know, Dylan, what is your perspective about let's use SurveyMonkey to clients, not to tenants? I don't want to invite more tenant stuff. On a mass level, because it's not a bad point. It's just not something that I personally have had, you know, bandwidth to do, but would love to do.
And how you kind of track all these responses, and then, you know, I have a phone call with you, you know, check in, you know, every few months, you know, and it depends on the client. Some of our clients are paying. You know, they have our service because they don't want anything to do with
I'm having difficulty.
I'm having trouble with Dylan's audio.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
That's a little
echoey.
better. Going really fast like a mouse.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you okay?
A little better.
We only have a few minutes left. We should, it's a good question if we can get the answer to it. Sort of a forward looking, you know, where's this industry going? And what I hear Matthew saying is we have opportunities probably in you know, streamlining communication and being more proactive in what is fundamentally a reactive business. So where's the future of this business? I mean, are we going to see the big guys get bigger in your industry as technology and scale becomes more important? Or is it still hand-holding and the consultative approach that got you here for the last 50 years, Matthew?
Really good question. Something that keeps me up for longer than my kids do every single night is wondering that exact piece of this. Now, you know, what's interesting is In our world, property management has been a very similar appetite as what you're seeing in the apartment world, where you have these massive global hedge funds, private equity, and so forth. That to me is our threat, is where that's going to go, where you have these monsters that like a business that's where the client has a tough barrier to change, or where you have this steady revenue. So as far as where that will actually lead, I consider it a threat that the behemoths are going to continue to get larger, but I still ultimately rest laurels on the fact that, those behemoths, maybe they can buy an apartment building and cash checks. They still need that middle operator, which is the management company, to have that very local presence, very local vendor knowledge and people and interpersonal components that I don't think they're going to be so successful in that parade into the industry. So I hope I'm right. I mean, I think that there's a lot of opportunity for organic growth beyond them. And, the question that comes to my mind too is product type. So, commercial office, for example, is it's an industry that's having a lot of trouble. And, I think a lot of our role as manager will be dependent on where the real estate market goes, as far as what are the products that need management. Will commercial office exist? Will the resi boom start to take over all of these sort of dormant sites? Will they become warehouses that are triple net and don't really need management? It's going to be very interesting, but following a long-winded answer, I'd say in summary, I don't think the huge global operators will be very successful. And I think that there will remain a need for this niche business.
Yeah, I still think management. Can you hear me better?
Yeah.
Okay. Management's always going to be a high touch business. You can implement tech in a lot of places, paying expenses, collecting checks, but there's no substitution for human interaction when you're dealing with a problem. People still want to be heard. There's a lot of backlash about some of these bigger property management companies implementing AI tech responses through bots. That's not going to solve the issue when you've got Old Faithful coming out of your toilet because something has exploded. They still want urgent response. They still want to talk through the problem with somebody. You still need to send somebody urgently. Some sectors of this business can't be replaced by technology.
Dylan, when private equity firm Cabrera Engel comes to you with $1 billion and says, this is an industry that needs to be rolled up. Let's go buy a bunch of Felner corporations and let's provide this at scale in every little corner of the country where there's a luxury market to be served. Are you in?
Look, they're already doing it. We get approached all the time by the behemoths to acquire us. But, look, we're very much a boutique service. I love what we do. I love getting to grow this company. And it's, you can be as large as you want, but you're only going to be as good as the people you have. And we're a service industry. If you're a bigger behemoth,
hasn't been right, John. The price hasn't been right.
And my wife won't let me stay home either. She makes me go to work.
Cabrera Engel needs to sweeten the pot, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at a couple of guys that, what the hell are we going to do?
What am I going to do? And my wife won't let me stay home.
This has been a
$1 billion,
phenomenal
John.
hour.
This has
$1
really
billion. I'm moving to Australia.
You're in.
You're
You're either going to be rolled up or you'll be doing the rolling.
We'll be doing the rolling.
Yeah.
And once this hits YouTube, expect some private equity firms to give you a call and say, let's go rolling, boys.
Yeah, well, listen, John, it's happening. The key to that is that, none of us, I don't think, would even talk to a private equity firm that would change management or change model or anything like that. The key would have to be an operator that isn't involved in the management of the business. Because for me personally, and Dylan, like, this is our baby, right? And our people are like our family. And so, you know, I even for $1 billion, I'd have no interest in someone that's going to come in and just shake up the whole thing and ruin every client's relationship and do what we would expect that they do and just be this like bottom dollar type operation. It's not our philosophy. It never has been, and I can't see it ever being.
For $1 billion, I might be convinced.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I was thinking $1 billion.
All
Billion something.
All right.
I love
Thank
what
you
you guys
guys.
do.
This
I
has
gotta
been Boroughs and Burbs. We now have boroughsandburbs.com website. I want to thank gracefarms.org again. Go visit Grace Farms. Thank you, Felner Corporation. And thank you, XL Real Property Management. This has been a great show.
Thank you,
Thank you,
guys.
John and Roberto and Mike Matthew.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both. Dylan,
All
nice
right.
to meet you. I'm
Cheers,
sure we'll cross
guys.
paths.
All right. Nice to meet you as well. All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.